We are midway through the NAIA football season for 2024. Can you believe it is that time of the year already? And listen, I'm just happy to be back. I'm Joey McWilliams here. We're going to talk about the top 5 performances in the 2024 NAIA football season, week 6. There is a lot that's happened. There's a lot going on. Shout out to everyone watching tonight. Hey, please let us know. Let me know, please. I would love to know if you're watching tonight, and especially from where you are watching. I invite you to Midwest Sportsnet. We talk about small college sports and more throughout the Midwest and beyond. We're going to get into the top 5 in just a moment. We have to go beyond the 5 first. And so let's do it. Let's get right to it. Number 1 team in the country, Kaiser, will be the number 1 team in the country after week 6. And I have to tell you, this one, if you followed this game at all, it was very similar to a game in Division 1 last week. Now, if you're an Alabama fan, just go ahead and put yesterday behind you. Let's not talk about yesterday, but if you're an Alabama fan, let's talk about last weekend and the game against Georgia. The couple of top 10 teams, top 6 teams, as a matter of fact. They were top 4 with Alabama and Georgia. Top 6 when you're talking about Kaiser and St. Thomas. One of a couple of games on the schedule that is getting conference play going. And realistically, the winner of this game sets the tone for the rest of the conference schedule. And so Kaiser, St. Thomas, Kaiser, the higher ranked team, and they get up early, get up real early, 24-3 in the first quarter. But the lower ranked team, still a top 10 team, comes back. And the Bobcats did just that. They came back in a big time way. Not only did they come back, but they come back and took the lead, not unlike that Georgia-Alabama game. But the higher seeded team, the top team in the country in Kaiser, as the Seahawks have already come away. I mean, and it's a Kaiser schedule, so you know there are going to be some tough games on the schedule. Seahawks already with 2 wins over Division II programs. And even though St. Thomas took the lead late in this game, Kaiser comes away with the victory. Rafino Van Gates had 4 catches, 172 yards, including the game-winning 70-yard touchdown reception. Props to Kaiser. They will be number 1 in next week's rankings, not ratings, wherever you happen to find your rankings. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. There's some media rankings out there as well. So, number 1 team in the country comes away with a victory, survives, if you will. Number 2 team in the country, which has been Northwestern, and the defending national runners-up came away with a loss in this one. And it was an upset, if you will. I'm not going to go on full upset mode on this one. I really don't think it was a full-on upset, and I'll tell you why. Concordia has a lot of weapons, and specifically a defensive effort. Now, I talk about some of the offensive weapons specifically when I'm talking about the Bulldogs, but the defense held sway, held Northwestern to just 17 points. I realize this is a Northwestern team that not long before the start of the season found out that the NAIA Player of the Year last year in Jalen Gramstad, who was all everything, led him to 2 national championship game appearances, was moving on to Division I Nebraska. You've got some younger quarterbacks in there, hadn't thrown interceptions to this point, but they did on Saturday, and actually 4 of those, with 3 Bulldogs snagging at least 1, Dalen Henson picking off 2. Concordia snapped Northwestern's 20-game home winning streak, and really the only team that had beaten Northwestern in the GPAC in quite a while was Morningside. Well, that number's changed. Concordia comes away with a 29-17 victory, 4-2 on the season, and we're going to have the opportunity to talk to Coach Daverco tomorrow here on Midwest Sportsnet, so tune in for that. That should be fun. Benedictine, 56. Culver Stockton, 21. Jacob Gathright, 4 receptions, 128 yards receiving, and a receiving touchdown. The Lions from Langston get a home win, and it is a big one. Lions get up early, and they were up throughout. Nelson, however, the artists formerly known as Southwestern Assemblies of God, Nelson rallied, takes a 29-28 lead on a 75-yard drive that was capped with a touchdown, a 2-point conversion late in this game with 1 minute and 16 seconds left. You got to give a lot of credit to Nelson for rallying, coming all the way back and going for it for the 2-point conversion. Think everything's all right? Well, Michael Nash said, no, it's not all right. And on the ensuing kickoff, he had a 90-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. Langston escapes it home 35-29, and the Lions now are at 3-2 on the year. Props to Langston. How about Grandview? Let's just go ahead and say it. 89-0. I'm of the class of 89, okay? I didn't expect that to be one of the scores from Saturday's game, but the Vikings continue to roll. 55 consecutive regular season wins for Grandview, and pretty much all Hart Conference wins too, I believe, in the regular season. Not divisional wins, but overall Hart Play Conference wins, and they get the victory over Clark. Mayville State, by the way, in the North Star, picking up a big win, moving not only to 4-2, which, by the way, that's the most win for the Comets since 2016, but they also put the first notch in the loss column for Dakota State. Big victory for Mayville State, 13-12 North Star play. Now, I realize Dickinson State continuing to roll. That's just part of it. We picked Dickinson State from the outset this season. There's no reason to think any different right now, but you have to watch out for the Comets of Mayville State. Again, big victory and giving Dakota State their first loss of the season. How about Oklahoma Panhandle? A 48-40 victory, and they hold on for a big win to the Aggies over Louisiana Christian, picked near the top of the Sooner Athletic Conference, and in some polls at the top of the Sooner Athletic Conference. Not been the season for the Wildcats that they wanted, and Oklahoma Panhandle with a big-time victory there. Jamarian George, 6 carries, 162 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the win. Bethany, who told the Swedes they could win? Well, they can. And we had a visit with their coach at the start of the season again this year. Felt pretty good about the team. They're 3-3 right now. Now, I realize Kessinger Division play hasn't started yet, but they kept Ottawa winless on the season. These are the Braves who made it to the playoffs last year. 13-0. Not only winless, but scoreless on Saturday, as Bethany now even at 3-3 on the year. This is a Swedes program that has some history, so don't count out Bethany, and they may not be through notching some wins. However, in the Kessinger Division in the KCAC, that is one tough division. And I realize this is going to switch coming next season. Every 2 years, they're going to switch things around in the Kessinger and the Bissell Division. But the disparity between those two divisions is absolutely, it's all but tangible, and you can see it if you check out the standings. Dort, 4-0 on the year. 38-3, the Defenders over the Tigers. Dort over Doane in this one. Colson Cruz, 18 for 29 passing, 318 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, no picks. By the way, carried the ball 10 times for 61 yards as well. Props to the Defenders, still up there near the top, or actually at the top of the GPAC standings. Morningside has a loss, but not in the well, we'll talk more about Morningside next week. Morningside has the bye week. There we go. Still thinking about another team there. Morningside is a bye week. We have a lot to talk about with Morningside. My pick, by the way, for the GPAC championship this year, you have to go back to August. That was the last time we did a live show. It was the first portion of August before everything here went sideways. If you haven't seen or haven't heard, I have a video about that. Please check it out. But I'm very thankful to get to visit with you all tonight. So first live show in a long time. We'll talk more about Morningside next week, or maybe later this week. Who knows? We'll get to Morningside and the Mustangs. Baker without Truman Julesgaard coming away with a win, rallying for a victory over Missouri Valley. And these are two of the winningest teams in the NAI. They are the two winningest teams in the NAI. 4-1, and the Wildcats with that one loss to Benedictine a couple of weeks ago. Baker trailing 16-3, scored 23 unanswered points to rally for the win. Sam Hegeman, 12 for 24 passing, 102 yards, had a couple of picks, but he had 13 carries for 106 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Shout out to the folks here in the chat. Elisa, good to see you, and it is good to be back. And Josh, hello from Denison, Texas. Good to hear you again. Josh, it's always good to see your name coming up there. Dale, Roll Stangs. Dale, I promised to talk more about Morningside next week, but they had the bye week. So, only so much you can do with that here on Beyond the Five. That's all right. McPherson with a big-time win over Kansas Wesleyan, 42-13. Not only points on the board, but that's a big win in a crossover matchup now in the KCAC. Still getting used to saying that. Tristan Szabo, 12 for 22 passing, 95 yards. Still had 3 passing touchdowns on the day. No picks. 4 carries, 37 yards. 1 rushing touchdown for Szabo as well. So there we go right there. By the way, if it is a little bit new, little sporting the beard now a little bit more. I like the goatee. I don't know. Mrs. Midwest Sportsnet likes the beard. It does show a little bit more of the ultra blonde out there, but that's okay. Some people call that gray. I like ultra blonde. I think that works a little bit better. How about Friends? How about the Falcons? How about 6-0 on the season, a 59-14 win. It was homecoming in Wichita, and Friends comes away with another victory there. Got off to a 45-0 lead and went ahead and took it home 59-14. Now, I'm going to talk about another team that's rushing the ball right now, but you can't just scroll right over Friends and not talk about the fact that the Falcons are putting up 446 rushing yards a game. Now, consider last year. It was the 4th highest total in NAIA history. They averaged 419 rushing yards a game. That was through 11 games. 2,676 rushing yards right now. Quick math on this one, and they are just 8 to 9 rushing yards per game average that they need to improve to get 5,000, that's right, 5,000 rushing yards just in the regular season alone. And at 6-0, you have to think the Falcons have a decent chance of making the playoffs. We'll talk a little bit more about the Kessinger division. Dave, good to see you. Thanks for being there in the chat. Roll Stangs. Got a couple of Morningside fans in the chat right now. And again, bye week. We'll talk more about that later. Actually, I have a little bit to talk about. I think Dave would appreciate as well. So we'll hit that next week. Another big victory, Texas Wesleyan. Texas Wesleyan 77 and Arkansas Baptist, well, pass. Anyway, Carson Rogers 15 for 19 passing, 309 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. Ernest Caesar 8 carries, 50 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. Probably everybody in blue and gold had an opportunity to play in this one. Let's move west a little bit, talk about a couple of Frontier Conference games as the cannibalism within the conference continues. College of Idaho moves to 4-2 with a 49-31 victory over Rocky Mountain. 1,088 total offensive yards combined between the two. Andy Peters in the last 2 weeks has just put the stat line into overdrive. Last week, 509 yards of total offense. This week, topped the 400-yard mark in total offense, including 18 for 36 passing, just 50% passing completion, but he connected for 4 passing touchdowns, 338 yards, had 1 pick, 15 carries for 89 rushing yards as well. Now, I don't want to pass over what Graydon Buell did for Rocky Mountain. He was 22 of 40 passing, right near that 50% passing completion as well, but had 373 yards, and he also threw for 3 touchdowns, had 1 pick, carried the ball, and carried 1 in for a score as well. So 4 touchdowns for Buell, too. College of Idaho, 2 losses on the schedule early, and so this one, it's going to be a little bit tougher, I think, to come out of the Frontier Conference this year. Had 3 in the playoffs last year. I know we'll talk about it a little bit more as the season moves along. I don't see more than 3. I know there's some talk for 4 playoff teams because there are 5 really, really tough teams up there at the top of the standings right now. We'll see how it plays on because clearly there's a lot more to be played out over the course of this season. I want to say thanks to everyone for watching tonight, and I appreciate you watching the live show as well. If you are watching tonight, let me know from where you're watching. I'd love to hear that as well. And a shout out to you too. Montana Tech hands Southern Oregon its first loss of the season, 42-35. Blake Thielen, 17 for 22 passing. Nice afternoon. 225 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns as the Ore Diggers come away with a big victory. 4-1 on the year. Southern Oregon 4-1 on the year. Still going beyond the 5 here for just a little bit longer, and we talk about Florida Memorial, go all the way back to the other side of the state where there's been inclement weather, and more inclement weather is on the way. So we should be praying for those who have been dealing with this and will deal with it as well. One of my sons-in-law, his parents in Tampa, and I think that they're actually they're looking for higher ground right now. So keep that in mind. Florida Memorial, a little different location, gets the win. One of the only teams in the country with a tie. We can talk about that a little bit more. 2-1 on the year. Florida Memorial 43-15 over Warner in Sun Conference play. George Young, 17 carries, 152 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns, and one more big rushing afternoon before we get to the top 5. Concordia on its farewell tour. The Cardinals pick up the win, the second win of the season for Concordia up there in Ann Arbor. Second Concordia we've talked about today. Of course, the other one in Seward, Nebraska, getting that big victory over Northwestern. Concordia 2-4, 45-6 over Judson. And Brandon Stewart, 12 for 76 rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns. Now, shout out to everybody in the chat. If you're watching this on the replay too, shout out to you. Thanks for watching this long. I also want to give a shout out to a friend of the channel, NAIA Football, Corey Thorpe and the guys. Well, they've been hopefully keeping the seat warm for me a little bit while I've been out of pocket. And I know that Corey has been doing a fantastic job. So NAIA Football has its weekly recap show of the week before on Monday nights. That is at 8 o'clock Central Time, or excuse me, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. This one's at 8 o'clock Central, 9 Eastern. NAIA Football, Mondays, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. He's out there in Florida too. He had to get out of Dodge or whatever part of the Big Bend he was in to move to some higher ground with that weather from last week as well. So he has the internet back, and I know he's got his show ready for tomorrow night. So shout out right there. All right, top 5 for week 6, top 5 performances. And let's pull the graphic up so we can get that on there. Here we go. If you didn't hear the name of the team or the player you thought was going to be in that beyond the 5, well, your wait comes no longer. And we saw an afternoon yesterday in which somebody put 7 touchdowns on the board. Let's talk about that right now. Top 5, and we begin with Pikeville. Now, this one's a little bit kind of closer to home for me, just from the perspective of the last time I had an opportunity to do a coach's interview, what proved to be my final coach's interview before health and a couple of things went sideways around here in mid-August, was Coach Phipps. We were talking about Pikeville and what he was looking forward to with the season. Well, it hasn't started the way the Bears wanted. 0-4 in the scheduling. Of course, Pikeville in the AAC now, the Appalachian Conference, and some scheduling tie-ins with the Mid-South. 0-4, didn't get the season started. But this was the other game that I mentioned, like that Kaiser St. Thomas game, where it's the first game of conference play, and you look at it and go, the winner of this game likely is going to win the conference. I mean, this far ahead in the season, you not only get the 1-game lead over another team, but you really have a 1.5-game lead, because if it comes down to just both teams having 1 loss, well, then the team with the victory would have the head-to-head matchup. And so that's what we're looking at right here. And Reinhardt has been the perennial favorite in the Appalachian, especially since the Appalachian has started with sponsoring football, but then you go back to the Mid-South and the Appalachian division of that as well. This is a big game. Reinhardt comes in with some wins, a little bit more or a little bit less maybe than what they want to. Pikeville comes in 0-4, and Pikeville comes away with a huge victory, 47-21. The Bears get the first win of the season. And again, this is a big one because you're coming away now with a conference win, and you get the win over the perennial favorite to pick to win the Appalachian. Pikeville in good position now to make the playoffs. Now, you don't like the record, I'm sure, 1-4. I'm sure Coach Phipps doesn't like that, but he has to like the victory. And how about Lee Kirkland? We talked about him 2 or 3 times near the end of the season in 2023. 35 for 51 passing, just shy of 70% passing completion, just shy of 300 at 299 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, no interceptions, 12 for 54 rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns, and he punted 1 time for 40 yards as well. 5 touchdowns on the day for Lee Kirkland for Pikeville. We move on along. Graceland, 4-2 on the season, still with an opportunity in that Hart North Division as the Yellow Jackets will get more going with getting out of crossover play into divisional play. Graceland, 43, Peru State, 35. It was homecoming in Lamoni, and the Yellow Jackets with a win. We've talked about Cade Ross a couple of times, right at 50% passing, but he connected for 379 yards, 23 of 44, and 6 passing touchdowns, 1 interception. Gerald Monroe caught 4 of those touchdowns, 6 catches, 117 yards. That is a combo, number 1 to number 2. It's a 1-2 connection that just continues to roll for Graceland. My dark horse pick, or one of my dark horse picks, to make it to the playoffs and have the potential to make a run deep into the playoffs. So continue to watch Graceland. Big game coming up sometime soon. We'll talk about that a little bit more. I didn't mean to skip Mid-America Nazarene because, hey, the Pioneers are big time on our radar. Kind of like Friends. This is a team last year that got overlooked. This is a team right now, after crossover play in conference, still undefeated, and a big-time win over William Woods, 70-7. And led by Adrian Parsons, 16 for 29 passing, 186 passing yards, but 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. Also 6 carries for 65 yards and a rushing touchdown as well. He had 4 touchdowns on the day. Probably a pretty good day. Not the best day on his team. Cameron Finley, 18 carries, 193 yards. That's a nice afternoon. And 5 rushing touchdowns for Cameron Finley. Props to Mid-America Nazarene. And although our schedule here at Midwest Sports Net got shifted all around, and we would have been a few more places already had things been a little bit different, still, there's a chance. Might make it to Olathe. There's a chance. So you're saying there's a chance. Yeah, I'm saying there's a chance. It actually all depends, too, on things here at the house. I don't know. Many of you may know we have 5 children, Mrs. Midwest Sportsnet and I do. And our twins, who are the youngest of the 5, are seniors this year. And so we're trying to follow them through some of the band performances as well. Made one this Saturday, too. So that was kind of nice. Anyway, all right, let's move on along because we kind of build things up here. We're building up to something. Southwestern 69, St. Mary 29. Southwestern 6-0 in the year, one of 3 teams in the Kessinger division, undefeated going into divisional play. They get the bye week next week, and Southwestern, along with Friends and Evangel, all undefeated in Kessinger division play. Braden Howell, fantastic afternoon, and efficient afternoon on top of that. This is a good afternoon, folks. When you go 19 for 23 passing, you've absolutely done well, passing at better than 80% completion rate on the day. But how about this? 379 yards, too. Big time day. And connected for 6 touchdowns. Braden Howell, They needed him a little bit near the end of the season last year, dealt with some injuries. I want to see him stay healthy for Southwestern as they go into divisional play and things start to really sort themselves out in the KCAC Kessinger division. 6 touchdowns, no picks, efficient, 379 yards. Props to Braden Howell on his evening. And then the big day, the big number on the day, and this one's huge. Taylor. The Trojans are 5-1. Has anyone been following Taylor? The Trojans are 5-1 right now after a win over St. Francis. And the scores on the day, 58. So 56 of them coming by way of touchdown. There was a safety too. You have to factor that in. 8 touchdowns scored on the day. Jamison Chesser, well, he took care of 7 of them by himself. Opened the scoring, closed the scoring. 25 carries, only 138 yards. Only 138 yards. I know. It's a pretty good afternoon. But still, when you've got into the end zone 7 times on the day. That's right. Jamison Chesser, 7 rushing touchdowns for Taylor. The Trojans 5-1. Now, I mentioned Friends a little bit earlier, and I said that I would be talking about another program with a pretty good ground game. That's Taylor. The Trojans, don't look now. Taylor's averaging 343.8 rushing yards per game. Still a far cry behind what Friends is doing, about 100-plus yards less than that, but is already, as a team, crossed the 2,000 rushing yard mark, 2,063 rushing yards. The Trojans trying to get into position for a playoff spot, and you're talking about week 6, 5-1 on the year. Trojans haven't seen the playoffs since 1999. They have the opportunity to put themselves in that position now. So Taylor, 5-1 on the year, big win. Jamison Chesser, one more time, 7 touchdowns. Our players that have given us the top 5 performances: Lee Kirkland, Cade Ross, Gerald Monroe, Adrian Parsons, Cameron Finley, Braden Howell, and Jamison Chesser. Very good evening tonight. Hey, I want to give a shout out one more time to the fine folks at NAIA Football. If you haven't checked out that channel, Corey Thorpe has things going on over there, and I appreciate him. Want to give a shout out to him. By the way, media rankings, I said that correctly. Media rankings will be out tomorrow there on the NAIA Football media poll, so you'll be able to see that there, see where Corey, and actually I get to be a part of that as well, and a number of other folks around the country have been able to give our input to that. So we'll check that out. But again, his show tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We should be able, as we close things out tonight from the live broadcast, should be able to have at least one live show this week. We'll check it out, see how everything works out. And then, of course, we'll be back live again next Sunday night. Also, don't forget tomorrow, an opportunity to visit with Coach Patrick Daberco from the Concordia Bulldogs, as Concordia coming off a big-time win. Again, it's an upset, but I don't think it's a huge upset because they have some things going on there in Seward. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Please be sure and tune into the channel. Shout out to Elisa, Joss, Dale, Dave. Thank you all for being a part of the chat tonight. And thank you for watching. And if you are watching this live, man, I can't say enough about you being part of the first live broadcast in almost 2 months here on Midwest Sportsnet. And also, by the way, if you are watching the recorded broadcast and you've stuck around this long, you're a trooper. And I appreciate that. And you probably wanted to see if one of your players was on the team. Dale, it's a privilege to be back. And it's a privilege to get to visit with you all every single time. So we'll see you tomorrow, by the way. That's when we'll see you. So look for the opportunity here on the Summit on Midwest Sportsnet. Talk about that victory for Concordia over Northwestern. Next week, we'll talk a little bit more about Morningside. That's just a preview. Anyway, God bless you all. Thank you very much for being a part of it, and have a great night. I am very, very thankful to be back with you all.